إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الكلام كلام الله وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار وبعد. Certainly, Ikhwan, the topic of Tawheed, the topic and this subject and this affair and this great matter, it is from, without doubt, the most important of the subjects and of the topics and of the matters and of the issues that you will study. It is that affair, Ikhwan, that Allah Azza wa Jal created the heavens and the earth to establish. It is that affair that Allah Azza wa Jal sent the prophets and the messengers to convey. It is that affair that Allah Azza wa Jal destroyed nations on the basis of them staying away from and opposing. It is that affair that Allah Azza wa Jal granted aid to another set of individuals from those who followed the prophets and the messengers throughout time, granted them aid and blessed them, overlooked their sins and forgave them. And it is the only thing by way of which any individual will enter Jannah. At-Tawheed. Topic, brothers and sisters, that if we were to spend the whole of our lives, from the time that we can perceive until the time that we pass away, studying this affair of Tawheed, we would have not been able to do the affair justice. An affair, ayyuhal ikhwah, that on the day of judgment, as occurs in that authentic hadith, any individual that spent his time not remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it will be for him hasra yawm al-qiyamah. It will be a form of regret for him yawm al-qiyamah. Something we're not able to understand and perceive. And so, brothers and sisters, the affair of Tawheed, it is the most important affair that any individual has ever spoke about from the beginning of creation until this hour. Indeed, from the prophets and the messengers, Ikhwan, there were those who were persecuted on the basis of its establishment, and from their followers. From them were those, ayyuhal ikhwah, who spent close to 1,000 years calling to it. From them, there were those who, even after their call and their da'wah, only one or two individuals followed them, but they remained steadfast. And from the prophets and the messengers were those who called, and as the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned, "Laysa ma'ahu ahad." No one followed him. Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam called to this affair for close to 1,000 years. And Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned, وَمَا آمَنَ مَعَهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. That no one believed alongside him and with him except a few. And thus the affair of Tawheed, ikhwan, that Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed us in this large gathering of brothers and large gathering of sisters and children who are being nurtured upon it and understanding it to the best of their ability, memorizing text and nusus related to it, and memorizing from the best of the verses and from the best of the speech that Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed to anyone in His creation. That, ikhwan, is a ni'mah from the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal. Ni'mah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has informed us, ayyuha al-ikhwa, concerning the affair of His Tawheed. Wa ilahukum ilahun wahid, la ilaha illa huwa ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And indeed your deity, your Lord and your God is one deity. You have no deity worthy of worship except Him. And He is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And Allah Azza wa Jal has likewise mentioned, Huwa Allahu alladhi la ilaha illa hu, alim al-ghaybi wa shahada, Huwa Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He is Allah. There is no deity worthy of worship but Him. Alim al-ghaybi wa shahada, the one that knows the unseen and that which is witnessed. And He is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Huwa Allahu alladhi la ilaha illa hu, الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر. Allah mentions it is He. There is no deity worthy of worship but Him. Al-Malik, the King, the true King. Al-Quddus, the one who is pure and perfect. As-Salam, the one who is free from blemish. Al-Aziz, the one who is honorable and mighty. Al-Azizul Jabbar, the almighty compeller. Al-Azizul Jabbar al-Mutakabbir, he who is rightfully proud. Allah Azza wa Jal, He refers to Himself by way of these names. And these names, ayyuha al-ikhwa, they have an effect upon those who believe in them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He informs us of the fact that He is Al-Aziz, that name for the one who believes in it and understands it, it has an effect upon him. Al-Malik, it has an effect upon him. Al-Quddus, it has an effect upon him. As-Salam, it has an effect upon him. Al-Mu'min, the one who attests to his own oneness, and the one who is the grantor of security, it has an effect upon him. Al-Muhaymin, it has an effect upon the individual, understanding these names and attributes of Allah subhanahu. Similarly, when he studies and reflects upon that which Allah Azza wa Jal has carried out with previous nations, the af'al of Allah subhanahu, that which Allah Azza wa Jal has carried out in the past, whether it be with individuals, whether it be to entire nations, whether it be to those who have believed or to those who have disbelieved, that which one studies from that has an effect upon the believer. And it is that effect, ayyuha al-ikhwa, that causes the believer, and if you like, shapes the believer in terms of his tawajjuh, in terms of his direction, in terms of that which he considers important, and that which he considers irrelevant, his goals, his ethics, his morals, all of those affairs return back to this issue of Tawheed. His a'mal and his actions, all of them, ayyuha al-ikhwa, have a connection to this affair of Tawheed. And thus we have the statement, ayyuha al-ikhwa, of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Shaykh al-Islam, he mentions a beautiful statement, ikhwan, concerning the affair of Tawheed and the effect that it has upon the believer. He mentions in Majmu' al-Fatawa, volume 28, page 32. وَلَيْسَ لِلْقُلُوبِ سُرُورٌ وَلَذَّةٌ تَامَّةٌ إِلَّا فِي مَحَبَّةِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ وَالتَّقَرُّبَ إِلَيْهِ بما يحب ولا تتم محبة الله إلا بالإعراض عن كل محبوب سواه وهذا حقيقة أو هذا حقيقة لا إله إلا الله وهي ملة إبراهيم خليل الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. He mentions that indeed the qulub, the hearts, there is nothing that brings them joy and is more exquisite and brings them perfect pleasure except the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالتَّقَرُّبَ إِلَيْهِ, and drawing close to him with that which he loves. And he mentioned وَلَا تَتِمُّ مَحَبَّةَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا فِي الْإِعْرَاضِ عَنْ كُلِّ مَحْبُوبٍ سِوَى. Loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not complete except that the servant turns away from having love for everything other than him. He mentions وَهَذَا حَقِيقَةُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. And this is the reality, the true reality of La ilaha illallah. That the one who truly believes in La ilaha illallah and makes the tahqiq and implements correctly La ilaha illallah, then there should be nothing more beloved to him, nothing dearer to him, nothing more mahbub to him in his qalb than Allah Azza wa Jal. Nothing that he gives preference to that is greater than pleasing Allah subhanahu. And that is haqiqatu la ilaha illallah. That is the reality of la ilaha illallah, and that is the path of Ibrahim al-Khalil. And each and every one of us must ask himself or herself, is there something that is dearer to me and that I give preference to and that I have love for greater than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And not that that thing is greater fi haqiqatul amr, because that is mahal, that is impossible for anything to be greater than Allah Azza wa Jal. But is there something greater in my heart, in my qalb? Fakir, reflect, think about that affair. Is there something greater in my heart that I prefer, that I give preference to over pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And think of all of your actions. Think of everything. Sirruka wa alaniyatuk, that which you hide, that which is hidden, and that which you make apparent. Reflect upon all of that and ask yourself the question, and repeat the question, is there anything from the affairs that I consider dearer to me and that I give preference to over and above Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? For indeed, loving Allah Azza wa Jal with one's qalb and preferring the love of Allah over the love of anything else is the haqiqatu millati Ibrahim. That is the way and the path of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam. And so this affair, dear ikhwan, of the establishment of Tawheed and the effect that it has upon the individual and upon our masses and upon our societies, it is from the most important affairs that we should attempt to try and get a grip of and understand. Ikhwan, from the first of the things that we should realize is that our scholars, they mention that indeed the Sharia and the Aqidah, and what they mean by the Sharia and the Aqidah here is not the Sharia in the absolute general sense, meaning the whole of the religion and the whole of the deen, but the Sharia in the specific sense, that is, that which is related to the outer action. The scholars, they mention that there is a talazum and that there is a connection and a bond between the Aqidah and between the Sharia. And that is that every individual that has an Aqidah, that Aqidah has an effect upon his outer actions, an effect upon the Sharia and his method of implementing it. There is not an action that we perform. In order to understand the concept, there is not an action that we perform except that even though it is an action, we have an Aqidah connected to that action. When a person performs salah and he makes his takbir and he stands before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are numerous affairs related to the Aqidah that is connected to the action that he performs. He believes when he says Allahu Akbar that there is nothing, and he testifies that there is nothing greater than Allah Azza wa Jal, and that Allah Azza wa Jal is greater than all things great. And so he makes that declaration, and by way of it he enters into the salah. Allahu Akbar. And so he nullifies azama and greatness to anything from the creation over and above the greatness of Allah Azza wa Jal. And anything that is considered great from the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, then know that Allahu Akbar, Allah Azza wa Jal, is certainly greater. And that is Aqidah. He stands before Allah Azza wa Jal facing the Qibla because he knows that his messenger has commanded him with that and would do so himself. And he knows that Allah Azza wa Jal has commanded us with that. وَمِنْ حَيْثُ خَرَجْتَ فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. And wherever you leave from, then turn your face in the direction of the Masjid al-Haram, yani in salah, that it is compulsory upon him to do so. Aqidah. That he believes that he stands before Allah Azza wa Jal and that Allah sees him. And so the name of Allah Al-Basir, now it comes to his recollection and it is present with him while he prays. That Allah Azza wa Jal sees him. Likewise, that he believes that this action of his is from the first of the actions that he will be recompensed for Yawm al-Qiyamah after he dies. Aqidah. Aqidah in the day of judgment Aqeedah in the first of the things that will take place and that he'll be recompensed for on that day. He believes that there are angels in his presence. Aqeedah. He believes that if there is something in his mouth that he needs to eject, then he should not do it in front of him, neither to his right, rather he should do so to his left. That action based in Aqeedah. When a person fasts, he fasts because of the fact that he knows that his Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he has mentioned as-Siyamu Junnah. That Siyam, fasting, is a Junnah, it is a barrier between him and the punishment of Allah Azza wa Jal. Tawheed and Aqeedah. When he fasts, he believes that that fragrance that comes from his mouth, on the basis of his fast, that it is more beloved to Allah Azza wa Jal than misk, than musk. Aqeedah. When he gives his zakah, he gives it and his qalb is wajil, his qalb is in, it tremors, hoping that Allah Azza wa Jal will accept it, hoping that he's carried out this action correctly. Because he believes that the one who withholds his zakah, then he will be branded with that which he withholds Yawm al-Qiyamah on his side and on his back, with that wealth being heated in the fire of Jahannam. Aqeedah. And so there is not an action that a person performs except that in relation to that action there is Aqeedah, and there is a relation to this knowledge and this belief in the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so we see that the action bears fruit. And that fruit is based in Tawheed. That fruit has its basis in Tawheed. And that fruit, brothers and sisters, for it to be accepted and for it to be something loved by Allah Azza wa Jal, the Tawheed that it is based in must be correct. And so the Tawheed itself bears the fruit of action. And the sound nature of that fruit has a connection to the origin and to the root of that action, and that is his Tawheed. And so the affair, ikhwan, is of the essence. As it relates then to the affair, ikhwan, of the Tawheed having an effect upon our actions and having an effect upon us as individuals and upon us as a society and as a nation, then there is no doubt, ikhwan, that that is the case. When a person, ikhwan, he believes in the uluhiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his belief in the uluhiyyah and his belief that Allah Azza wa Jal alone should be called upon, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone should be worshipped, and that nothing from the acts of ibadah should be offered and should be performed for anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, ikhwan, the belief itself increases him in iman. The belief itself and the implementation of that, it increases him in iman and has an effect upon him. إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم درجات عند ربهم ومغفرة ورزق كريم. Allah mentions, indeed the mu'minun, indeed the believers, they are those إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. When Allah is mentioned, it causes their hearts to tremor. It strikes fear in their hearts just hearing the name of Allah. وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. And when his verses are recited upon them, it increases them in iman. وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. عَلَى رَبِّهِمْ وَحْدَهُ. And upon their Lord they rely. They have that tawakkul ala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wahda. وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Then Allah Azza wa Jal describes their actions, describes that which they carry out. الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Those who establish the salah and they spend from that which we have given to them. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا. These are the believers in truth. لَهُمْ دَرَجَاتٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. And they will have levels with their Lord, يعني raised levels. لَهُمْ دَرَجَاتٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَمَغْفِرَةٌ. And they will have forgiveness. وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ. And they will have a noble provision, يعني in the hereafter, when Allah Azza wa Jal rewards them with Jannah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from its inhabitants. And so the affair then of the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, ikhwan, it has an effect upon the qulub, it has an effect upon the hearts, it has an effect upon the action, it has an effect upon the suluk, and that which comes from the servant, from a'mal. It has an effect upon every single thing that he says. It has an effect upon every action that he carries out, his call, his da'wah. It has an effect upon every walk, ikhwan, of his life. And the more that he reflects upon Allah Azza wa Jal and implements that which is present in the book and in the sunnah, the more, ayyuhal ikhwa, he is affected by this knowledge of Tawheed and its athar. And in that regard, ikhwan, we have the beautiful statement of Al-Imam Hassan al-Basri, rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam Hassan, rahimahullah, he mentions a statement, ikhwan, that describes the nature of the believer. And it describes, ikhwan, that which he carries out and that which he's constantly upon in terms of him and his inner self. He mentions, rahimahullah ta'ala, عَامَلْنَا الْقُلُوبَ بِالتَّفَكُّرِ. He said that indeed we have worked upon our hearts with tafakkur, with reflection. That, ayyuhal ikhwa, is a reference to a study of the affair of Tawheed, the study of the Asma'i wa Sifat, the study of the affair of the Rububiyyah of Allah Azza wa Jal, implementing the Uluhiyyah, carrying out that which those affairs and those branches of Tawheed necessitate, constantly reflecting upon that. And so he mentions, rahimahullah ta'ala, عَامَلْنَا الْقُلُوبَ بِالتَّفَكُّرِ فَأَوْرَثَهَا التَّذَكُّرِ. He said, so we worked upon our hearts with this tafakkur, and it brought about tadhakkur. It brought about the affair of us being in a constant state of alertness and awareness. And this tadhakkur, the opposite of ghafla and of heedlessness. So we reflect, we have utilized our hearts in reflecting upon the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it brought about to us at-tadakkur, remembrance. That is, it puts us in a state of readiness and alertness, constantly remembering Allah Azza wa Jal, constantly remembering the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us, constantly reflecting and thinking about how better we can be. فَأَوْرَثَنَا التَّذَكُّرِ فَرَاجَعْنَا بِالتَّذَكُّرِ عَلَى التَّفَكُّرِ وَحَرَكْنَا الْقُلُوبَ بِهِمَا فَإِذَا الْقُلُوبَ لَهَا الْأَبْصَارُ وَأَسْمَاعُ. He said, and so we return with this reflection, and we return with this tadakkur, this remembrance, upon tafakkur, upon our reflection. وَحَرَكْنَا الْقُلُوبَ بِهِمَا. And by way of these two entities, by way of these two affairs, reflection, remembrance, awareness, readiness, action, and then we reflect, study, understand, increase, that causes that to have a knock-on effect upon us, a greater effect in bringing about this tadakkur and this reflection and this readiness and an increase in this awareness, and constantly the hearts are moving between tafakkur, reflection, and tadakkur, this remembrance and this readiness to act and implement. And so he mentioned وَحَرَكْنَا الْقُلُوبَ بِهِمَا, and we caused our hearts to move and be alive on the basis of the two of them. فَإِذَا الْقُلُوبَ لَهَا الْأَسْمَاعُ وَأَبْصَارٌ. And thus our hearts, on the basis of these two, have sight and have hearing. That the hearts are alive. The hearts on the basis of the fact that they were brought alive by way of Tawheed, and they were removed from their state of ghafla and heedlessness with this tafakkur and tadakkur, that they come alive and they are awake and they are alert and they are ready. And so the hearts, they have asma and they have absar. The hearts have hearing and sight. And that, no doubt, ikhwani, is why we see that our ulama and the people of knowledge, they have that basira and nafida. They have that sharp insight. And they have that farasa. And they have that insight, ikhwan, that is amazing sometimes. That is ajib, ikhwan, on the basis of their hearts being alive. And that is something that is perceived, ikhwan, it is seen from them. That they perceive affairs and they sense affairs on top of that which is present from qara'in and from the factors, the clear factors that are present. They likewise, Allah Azza wa Jal blesses them on the basis of this nur that Allah Azza wa Jal has placed within their hearts. They have something special within their hearts, ikhwan, by way of which they see that which we see not. Al-Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he makes mention, ikhwan, of some beautiful benefits related to this affair, ikhwan, of the manner in which Allah Azza wa Jal, He expands the breast and the chests of the believer on the basis of Tawheed and on the basis of him having and establishing the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he mentions, ikhwan, as occurs in Zad al-Ma'ad, that indeed inna Tawheed, or inna Tawheed Allah, أعظم أسباب انشراح الصدر. He mentions that indeed the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is from the greatest affairs and from the greatest of the reasons that a person has inshirah al-sadr. It is from the greatest of the reasons that a person has this expanded breast that establishes joy and bliss and happiness within his heart, يعني on the basis of this Tawheed. And Imam Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, he expounds upon that. Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he mentions that indeed from the fada'il and the virtues of Tawheed is that the one who establishes Tawheed, أن من حقق التوحيد دخل الجنة بغير حساب ولا عذاب. The one who truly establishes Tawheed, he enters Jannah without reckoning and without punishment. That is those who truly rely upon Allah Azza wa Jal completely. As occurs in that hadith, when the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he mentioned that from my ummah there are 70,000 يدخلون الجنة بغير حساب ولا عذاب, that they will enter Jannah without reckoning and without punishment. And the companions, they disputed among themselves about who they were. And then the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the following day, he informed them, هم الذين لا يسترقون ولا يتطيرون ولا يكتوون وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. They are those who don't seek ruqya for themselves, neither do they follow omens, neither do they practice cauterization. وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. But indeed and certainly rather they rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we mentioned in the verse, الذين على ربهم وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. They are those who rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he mentioned that indeed the one who implements Tawheed enters Jannah بغير حساب ولا عذاب. He mentions that in it is the maghfirah and the forgiveness of sin. He mentions that indeed it is a sabab and a reason for a person having the kurubat and the hardships and the difficulties of the dunya alleviated from him. He mentions that from its effects is that it prevents a person from remaining in the hellfire forever if he does enter. That if there is Tawheed in the heart, that he will ultimately exit the hellfire if he is caused to enter it, and may Allah protect us. He mentions likewise that by way of it, its companion and the one who is upon it, he achieves huda, and he achieves guidance, and he achieves perfection, and he achieves al-amnu tam, he achieves perfect security in the dunya and in the hereafter. He mentions likewise that indeed from its, or that it is the one cause for a person achieving the ridha Allah, the good pleasure of Allah and His reward. It is the only way, the only reason, regardless of what people wish to philosophize about, regardless of that which the people fail to understand and perceive. Then are you telling me that if I do such and such, I won't go to paradise? If you are not from Ahlul Tawheed, then Allah Azza wa Jal will not be pleased with anyone but the people of Tawheed. Understand that. And so the affair does not return back to what we philosophize about in our minds, but the affair is as Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth, has conveyed to us by way of His prophets and messengers. And so it is the one path and the one way that a person will achieve the ridha Allah and the good pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that the one who is upon this Tawheed, he is the only one that will achieve the shafa'ah and will achieve the intercession of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam yawm al-qiyamah. Similarly, that all of the a'mal and that all of the aqwal al-zahira wal-batina متوقفة في القبول أو في قبولها وفي كمالها وفي ترتيب الثواب عليها على التوحيد. All of our actions, the inner actions, the outer actions, all of them, their acceptance and their perfection, all of them are dependent upon Tawheed. He likewise mentions that it makes easy for the servant to carry out acts of khair and to leave alone munkarat and to find ease during times of hardship. Ikhwan, this is an important mas'ala because we oftentimes hear the people saying that I find it difficult for me to be affected. I find it difficult to really think about my sin and cry over my sins. I find it difficult to feel affected by the admonitions that I hear. I don't think I've ever cried over reading the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or shed a tear thinking about my standing before Allah azza wa jal. And how will my reckoning be? How am I going to stand before Him? How am I going to answer? How am I going to respond? How? Never shed a tear. And that, brothers and sisters, is something that wallahi each and every one of us must reflect upon. How are we going to stand before Rabbil Alameen? How are we going to give an account? How? And you know yourself better than anyone else. بل الإنسان على نفسه بصيرة ولو ألقى معاذيرة. Indeed, mankind knows himself better regardless of the excuses that he puts forward. How are we going to stand before Rabbil Alameen? Ikhwan, how? How are we going to give an account? Think about the years, think about the actions, think about the statements. How? And so Imam Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions that indeed it is this Tawheed that will bring ease to the servant in carrying out acts of good and in leaving alone evil and in finding ease during times of hardship. Similarly, he mentions that the hearts will not have the perfect love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and complete iman and be free of kufr and fusuq and isyan and sin except by way of this Tawheed. By way of it, he mentions that the makarih, the hardships and the difficulties are lightened upon the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more he perfects it, the more he completes it, the more his hardship and his difficulties are lightened. Similarly, he mentions أنه يحرر للعبد من رق المخلوقين. It frees the servant from the slavery of the creation. And that is every manifestation of slavery. People being slaves to design, slaves to culture, slaves to that which is present and the manifestation of the changes that occur in and among our midst. Slaves to style and slaves to the fashion industry and slaves to their desires. Slaves to the desires of others. Frees them from every form of slavery. slaves to those who attempt to tie them in the bonds of the slavery of the i'tiqadat al-batila, the slavery of the false beliefs, man-made belief, man-made aqaid. It liberates them, ayyuha al-ikhwa, from all of that. And it is by way of that liberation that they truly feel and experience the sweetness of Iman. Because that sweetness, once it is tasted, once a person truly tastes the sweetness, ikhwan, of Iman, then it is something that a person cannot return after tasting that. Cannot return back to the pomp and the glitter of the affairs of the dunya that used to grant him temporary joy. It is the only thing that provides him with permanent pleasure, permanent bliss, permanent happiness, true satisfaction within his qalb, within his heart, even if he is poor. And that is only experienced, ikhwan, truly by the muwahhid. And the more a person increases in that tawheed, increases in that tafakkur, returns it back to tadhakkur, causes the two of them to bring life to his heart, act upon the affair of tawheed, the more he does so, the more he is filled with bliss and tranquility and satisfaction and happiness. A sweetness that, wallahi, there is nothing in the dunya that anyone, ikhwan, may present that can provide for him a sweeter feeling than the sweetness that Tawheed grants him. Similarly, he mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala تكفل لأهله بالفتح والنصر في الدنيا والعز والشرف وحصول الهداية والتيسير لليسر وإصلاح الأحوال والتسديد في الأقوال والأفعال. He said that it is the only thing, and Allah Azza wa Jal has guaranteed to its people that He will grant them al-Fath, He will grant them victory and aid and nobility and honor, and He will grant them hidayah, guidance, and make their affairs easy and rectify their state and give them correctness in speech and action by way of this Tawheed. These brothers and sisters, subhanallah, how can anyone find boredom in this affair? How can anyone be fatigued from studying and learning and increasing in it, or being reminded concerning that which they already knew concerning it? How? Kaif? He mentions rahimahullah ta'ala, إن الله يدفع عن الموحدين أهل الإيمان شرور الدنيا والآخرة ويمن عليهم بالحياة الطيبة والطمأنينة إليه وطمأنينة بذكره. He mentioned that indeed Allah Azza wa Jal repels from the muwahideen, the people of Iman, the evils of the dunya and the hereafter, and He blesses them with a hayatun tayyibah. He blesses them with a good life, and that good life, ikhwan, is from the affairs that Allah Azza wa Jal has mentioned. من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن, whosoever does a righteous deeds from males or females and they are believers, then indeed لَنُحْيِيَنَّهُمْ حَيَاةً طَيِّبًا, we shall give them a beautiful life, a happy life. وَبِالْمُقَابِلِ, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى قال رب لم حشرتني أعمى وقد كنت بصيرا قال كذاك أتتك آياتنا فنسيتها وكذلك اليوم تنسى. Allah mentions, and indeed the one who turns away from my reminder and from my remembrance, then he will have a wretched life. وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى, and we will raise him Yawm al-Qiyamah blind. And he will say, oh my Lord, why have you raised me blind? وَقَدْ كُنْتُ بَصِيرًا, when indeed I used to be able to see. And so he will be responded by the statement, and such did the ayat, did my verses and my signs come to you, فَنَسِيتَهَا, and you forgot them and abandoned them. فَكَذَلِكَ الْيَوْمَ تُنْسَى, and thus today you will be forgotten. And that, brothers and sisters, is an affair that we warn everyone that surrounds us concerning, and that we do not wish that for them, and that we wish for them to enter into iman, to enter into khair, to enter into barakah, to enter into this affair, ikhwan, that brings to them the khair of the dunya and of the hereafter. Ikhwan, we saw the effect of this iman upon the salaf of this ummah. From the salaf of this ummah, ikhwan, were those who were affected as it relates to this affair, the likes of Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais, who on an occasion it was said to him, Ya Ahnaf, أين تجد نفسك أمن أهل الجنة أو من أهل النار? It was said to him, Ya Ahnaf, where do you find yourself, or where do you see yourself? Where do you consider yourself? From the people of Jannah or from the people of the hellfire? He responded by saying, Amhiloni, give me a period, and give me some time to think about that. And then he responded by saying, after a period, عرضت نفسي على صفة أهل الجنة فإذا فيها قوله جل وعلا في سورة الذاريات إن المتقين في جنات وعيون آخذين ما آتاهم ربهم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك محسنين كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون وبالأسحار هم يستغفرون وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم وفي الأرض آيات للموقنين وفي أنفسكم الآية فلم أجد نفسي في صفة أهل الجنة ثم عرضت نفسي على صفة أهل النار فما وجدت نفسي ممن وصف الله جل وعلا من أهل النار ثم نظرت فإذا شأني أني خلطت عملا صالحا وآخر سيئا عسى الله أن يعفو عني. That he mentions that indeed after he asked to be granted a period to reflect upon himself, he said, indeed I have reflected upon myself, and I have looked upon myself and the characteristics of the people of Jannah that Allah mentions in Surah Al-Dhariyat, wherein Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, indeed the muttaqeen, certainly those who fear Allah, they will be in gardens among rivers and streams, taking that which their Lord has given them. Indeed, they were prior to that from the muhsineen, from the people of ihsan. كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون. They were, and they used to spend little time in their beds by night, and in the morning هم يستغفرون. In the morning, the ashar, which is the period before Fajr, they were a people who were seeking the forgiveness of Allah Azza wa Jal. وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. And in their wealth, there was a right for those who ask and for those who were prevented, yani for the beggar. And so he mentioned, فَلَمْ أَجِدُ نَفْسِي فِي صِفَةِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ. And so I do not find myself among the characteristics of the people of Jannah. ثُمَّ عَرَضْتُ نَفْسِي عَلَى صِفَةِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. And then I turn myself and analyze myself as it relates to the people of the characteristics of the people of the hellfire. فما وجدت نفسي ممن وصف الله عز وجل من أهل النار. Neither did I find myself among those individuals, those who Allah has described, the people of the hellfire. And then he mentioned, ثم نظرت فإذا شأني أني خلطت عملا صالحا وآخر سيئا. And then I analyzed and I saw that I am from those who have mixed, those who Allah mentions in the Quran, those who mixed good actions with evil actions. فَعَسَى اللَّهُ أَنْ يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ. Then perhaps Allah Azza wa Jal will forgive them. And so he said, فَعَسَى اللَّهُ أَنْ يَعْفُوَ عَنِّي. And so perhaps Allah Azza wa Jal will forgive me. And that no doubt returned back to the effect of Tawheed upon him. Since he reflected upon himself, he reflected upon the actions of Allah Azza wa Jal, the af'ar of Allah Azza wa Jal, as it relates to the previous nations. He reflected upon that which Allah Azza wa Jal recompenses on the basis of. And then he looked at himself and recognized that he had shortcomings, he was deficient. And so he was not bold enough to say that I am from Ahlul Jannah, la. Recognizing that he had shortcomings as it relates to carrying out the huquq and the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he humbly mentioned that I am from those who mix good deeds with evil deeds, and perhaps Allah Azza wa Jalla will forgive me. And that attitude, ikhwan, then we saw this humility and this humbleness on the basis of the establishment of Tawheed. And many indeed were those from, and the examples from the Salaf of this ummah, ayyuhal ikhwa. From the Salaf of this ummah were those who, from the most minute of affairs, we saw the effect of Tawheed upon them. Rabi' ibn Khuthaym, the student of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, the daughter of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, used to refer to him as al-a'ma, the blind one. Even though he was not a'ma, even though he was not blind. And that is because of the fact that when he would knock the door of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, fearing that his eyes may lay or may set upon something that he should not see from the maharim of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, his daughter, his women folk, something inside the home, he would close his eyes. And when the door was open, he would ask for Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And his daughter would say, Ya Abi, ataka al-a'ma. The blind one has come to you. The blind one has come to see you. And that is, ikhwan, from the effects of Tawheed upon them, is that it is possible for him to remain and leave his eyes open, and for his eyes to catch something from the household of Ibn Mas'ud, not necessarily even intending evil, his women folk or what have you, just catch something from the affairs of the household of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. But he knew that Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Raqib, that Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Alim, that Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Basir. And so that would cause this effect, ikhwan, to manifest upon his limbs when he would visit his sheikh and his teacher Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, that is Al-Imam Rabi'. Similarly, we have those, ayyuhal ikhwah, from among the Salaf who were affected, ikhwan, by the affair of Tawheed, to the extent, ikhwan, that they would, when they would recite the Quran, like Ayyub as-Sakhtiyani, he would recite the Quran and it would cause him to weep, and he would weep profusely. And then when individuals would come in or in his presence, he would say, Ma ashad az-zukam. He would say, how serious this cold is, this zukam is, this runny nose that I have. Keeping his tears away from the people. Keeping his tears away from them. From them were those who could not prevent their tears even in front of the people. But from them were those who, when they would cry in secret, then they would keep their tears in secret. And that, brothers and sisters, no doubt is from the athar and from the thimar and from the fruits of Tawheed. Wallahi ikhwan, the fruits are many. The fruits of the belief in the malaika, the love that it causes and instills in the heart of the believers for the malaika, the fact that they make dua for us, the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal has created them in the beautiful nature that they were created, and the great nature in which Allah Azza wa Jal has created them. From them, Jibreel, whose wings filled the horizon. That which is related, ayyuhal ikhwah, to the effect that it has upon our hearts, from instilling the azama and the fear of the greatness of Allah Azza wa Jal within our hearts. The belief in the Rusul, the prophets and the messengers, and that which it brings about from the love within our hearts for our Lord, that Allah Azza wa Jal would continually send prophets and messengers bringing the huda, bringing the guidance, bringing salvation to mankind. When one was destroyed, another would be sent. When a book was distorted, another would be sent. All of that instilling nothing but love, ikhwan, within the heart of the believer. When he reflects upon his belief in qadar, the effect that it has upon his heart and upon his life is that it causes him to find ease during difficulties and hardship. He does not reflect, ikhwan, upon suicide or taking his own life, since he knows that this is an affair that has been decreed. He knows that it is an affair that he has to withstand and withhold with patience and sabr. And if he does so, then he will be rewarded. He recognizes that this is from the nature of the dunya. And so he remains steadfast, having that bond with his Lord. Remains steadfast, knowing that Allah Azza wa Jal has mentioned, Inna ma'al usri yusra. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Indeed, with hardship there comes ease. And so in every majal, in every walk of life, ikhwan, this iman, it has an effect upon the qulub. It has an effect upon the believer. It has an effect upon the individual. It has an effect upon the families. It has an effect upon the societies. A beautiful effect, ikhwan, that when it is manifest, then mankind, ikhwan, he is as he was created. He becomes as he was created. Fi ahsani taqweem. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us to establish this Tawheed and to increase, ikhwan, the Masajid of Allah Azza wa Jal, wherein the name of Allah Azza wa Jal is mentioned and raised, and wherein the du'at and the callers to Allah, ikhwan, they leave from those houses after being taught and educated and understanding Tawheed, and that they call the people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, call them to that which is better for them and best for them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to return us, ikhwan, back to the way of the prophets and the messengers, raddan jamila. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from Ahlul Tawheed in this dunya and to be raised among them in the hereafter. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى يوفقنا وإياكم لما يحبه ويرضاه وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.